All right, today's topic, we're going to talk about the growing economy in the early 1920s. So, what was something that, helped the growing economy?
I'd say Ford in the assembly line with the Model T.
So, what did he do?
So what he did is, well, back then a lot of people had long, harsh hours of work. Everything was expensive to buy, and workers were being paid trash and couldn't afford anything.
Yeah.
So what he did is he made a company that paid his workers very well, gave them more time off, and also sold the cars for a pretty good price. For example, in 1908, the Model T's first year, the car sold for $850. Only 6 years later, in 1914, it sold for $490.
Jeez, well, you want to hear kind of a fun fact?
Mm-hmm.
All right, by the following year, he made this, line, the assembly line.
Yeah.
They were building an automobile around every 93 minutes, but by 1925, a Ford car was rolling off the line every 10 seconds.
Jeez.
I know, that's crazy. And with this new assembly line, more and more people, started to get cars, so the automobile became a big part in people's lives. So it just helped, people who live in rural places, on farms, they can get jobs that aren't just on the farm, they can work in the cities and stuff.
True.
And I mean, one farm wife even said you can't ride to town in a bathtub.
It's facts.
Yeah.
Because there was a survey that said 21 out of 26 families who owned cars did not have a bathtub with running water.
Jeez.
I don't know, it's crazy to think now, everyone, all of us, we have a bathtub with running water or a shower, pretty much everyone does,
Facts.
and it's just crazy that people wanted cars over that.
And with cars, it was good because it made more suburban development. Because cities were so crammed, and now they could
Yeah.
spread out and people could
Yep.
drive around.
And I guess with all these new people buying cars and things like that, it also allows more prices to drop.
True.
Which also means that the company is wealthier because more people are buying the cars because more people can afford them. Which also means the workers also want to be there because you could probably cut hours. You can raise their wages so that they can work better and they can work more than what they want to because they're getting paid more. Which is exactly what Harrison Ford did. Or sorry, not Harrison, Henry Ford. He raised their wages. He doubled their wages to $5 from $2.50.
Jeez.
And they cut their workday to 8-hour shifts. So
Why did he do that though?
to build trust with his workers,
Oh.
to ensure that if things start to go downwards, people are going to want to stay there. People are going to keep working because their pay is so good.
Well, I know around this time, since Ford started really booming, other car industries like General Motors and Chrysler competed successfully with
Oh.
him. And I think that's why he tried to, gain his workers' trust.
Yep.
So they didn't, Chrysler, General Motors didn't try to,
Take his
outbid him
workers.
almost.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yep. And, with all this extra, leisure money these people have from working, it led to more new inventions coming out, new consumer products.
Oh, yeah.
Because people had all this disposable income, they're able to buy new inventions like electric razors, frozen foods, and even home hair color.
Yeah. Sure.
And hygiene became a big part. So people started buying vacuum cleaners, refrigerators. Just things to keep their home clean and them clean.
Yeah.
And toiletries, that became bigger. People started buying more of that, like mouthwash, deodorants, cosmetics, and all this other stuff. So.
And it's weird to think about it though. Back then, all these things that are needs to us, quote unquote, were wants back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Deodorant, you looked at it as kind of a need because it's I don't want to stink.
Yeah.
But back then, it's oh, it's cool you have deodorant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were I don't know. It's just crazy to think that wasn't a need. Well, I know another big thing that started happening around this time was the birth of the airline industry. Does anyone know anything about that?
Well, it kind of just took off in 1903 when the Wright brothers made their first successful flight, and it kind of just revolutionized the world because now people could just travel a lot faster. But it was kind of reserved for the more upper class because it was expensive to produce and make, so they had to make it worthwhile,
Well, I know one of the main uses, they kind of use this new airline thing because, it was kind of it was new, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
People didn't trust it as much, so not as many people wanted to fly on it. So most of the time, they would just carry their mail on it.
Oh.
And in 1918, the Postmaster General introduced the world's first airmail service.
Yeah.
And then, you know, eventually, you know, the Congress and, you know, other governments started supporting it. So in 1925, Congress passed the Kelly Act authorizing postal officials to hire private airline operators to carry mail. And in 1926, the Air Commerce Act provided federal aid to build these airports.
Airports is what kind of made it so everyone could fly too.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make it more of like a public thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, about how many cities were these airlines serving?
355 at this time, and
That's-
now I think it's way more.
Yeah,
Oh, absolutely.
It's crazy amount.
Yeah.
You know, it's crazy how something can just boom,
Mhm.
you know, quick. Yeah. Well, I know another thing that made like sports, you know, popular was the new radio industry.
Oh.
Yeah. And in 1913, American engineer Edwin Armstrong invented a special circuit that made it practical to transmit sound via long-range radio. So now people are, you know, listening to sports games like baseball and boxing, and they're listening to like news like companies like NBC, and yeah.
And for the 1920 election too, the Westinghouse Company broadcasted the news of Harding's landslide election victory from the station KDKA, I believe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, something like that in Pittsburgh. And one of the first broadcasts in history to ever do that. And that success persuaded Westinghouse to open other stations around the country.
So it
So-
did elections too, and like other
Yeah.
stuff in sports.
So how many stations did it, you know, bring?
Almost 700 by 1927, I believe.
That's crazy.
Jeez. What about the money? I don't know how much money they made.
Well,
from that.
I know kind of when, you know, it started to kind of boom, you know, it was about 10.6 million.
Jeez.
But once it was 1921, it was around 411 million.
Holy.
Jeez.
Jeez.
So how many radios would that equal out to then?
I don't know, it was somewhere around 12 million
12,
radios.
13, yeah.
Across the
something like that.
country.
Yeah.
So that's like almost every household
Yeah,
back then.
because
in
think about it,
America.
you know,
Yeah,
there
pretty
wasn't that many people back then.
Mm-hmm.
And with all these people buying these radios, there's bound to be some of them that can't afford it
True.
or just don't have the money for it right now.
Yep.
Which kind of segues us into the next topic here. How are these people buying them? How can everybody afford to buy these things?
Credit.
And it's credit.
Indubitably.
And can anyone explain credit?
Well, credit is, you know, something, it's you buy now, you pay later.
Mm.
You know, so if you want a car now, you buy it with like a credit card or something, right? And then eventually you have to pay all that money back.
Yeah. Like over a period of time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a good idea, but it has caused a lot of, let's just say,
But
negatives now.
that's kind of what led us into the Great Depression.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was everyone was buying stuff they couldn't afford.
Mm-hmm.
You know, no one can pay it back. So all the banks are going broke, so they can't lend out more money to other people.
Yeah.
That's kind of the dangers, you know, because
True.
It's
you're-
spiraling downward.
if you're spending with money, you know, you don't have,
Mhm.
and you're, you know, like your account balance or whatever isn't going down, you think you can just keep spending and spending
Yeah.
and spending, but then eventually it comes back and bites you. So I think that was just a big problem. So, what other things did the radios help with?
Advertising blew up.
Advertising.
Yeah.
So, like, what kind of deals did they advertise?
They did stuff like bread, kind of like today how we have commercials.
Yep.
Like in between radio segments, they would talk
Yep.
about stuff like, let's say, food they're selling, cosmetics, clothes, maybe, just anything to sell.
Oh, that's interesting.
Does anyone know what the managerial revolution was? Because that helped revolutionize these times too.
Well, companies were split into divisions with functions such as sales, marketing, and accounting, and the managers were hired to run these divisions, freeing executives and owners from the day-to-day running of the companies. But what did it help with?
Well, with the large number of new managers, it helped expand the middle class, and it added to the nation's prosperity. With these new developments in business organizations, it generated more business profits, which improved the nation's standard of living.
As Calvin Coolidge once said, in his exact words, it is not only by technical skill that the modern civilization is sustained. It depends to a large degree on accumulated and invested capital. Civilization and profits go hand in hand.
Wow. So, well, I know another thing that was happening around this time was the farm crisis. Can anyone tell me about that?
Yeah. the farm crisis was farmers after the war, because during the war, farmers needed lots of land to produce many crops because it was in high demand, because everybody needed food, and soldiers going across seas, they needed food. But after the war ended and everybody came back, the prices for these crops dropped dramatically. And everybody's trying to improve their farms and increase their production levels, but the demand for the crops, they just aren't there anymore. So the crop prices are dropping, so which means the farmers aren't making money, which kind of started this whole like kind of Great Depression thing. It was like it was known as the Quiet Depression because it wasn't like the actual Great Depression where it involved the whole entire economy yet.
So like it was just kind of creeping up on the Great
Yeah.
Depression.
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty interesting. All right, well, I think this wraps up today's lesson. It's been real.
It's been fun.
But it hasn't been real fun.